Greetings, curious acolytes of the galaxy, and welcome back to the archives. Dark Jedi are a curious topic that is rarely ever covered. The very term itself is such a broad umbrella word that it is difficult to really pin down the nature of being a Dark Jedi and what this really is. Many of these Dark Jedi are almost as elusive as Grey Jedi, however, they do exist, and they are very prominent figures in the Star Wars galaxy and lore. In a brief sense, the term of a Dark Jedi describes those that use the dark side of the Force but without any allegiance to a particular group or order. While this is a very rudimentary understanding of a Dark Jedi, it will suffice for now, as our discussion for today isn't entirely about the Dark Jedi. Actually, our researchers have been taking a look at some data manuscripts and have come across a few accounts by Dark Jedi and Sith alike. Using this research, as well as some conclusions drawn from our own perspective, we wanted to take a look at the distinguished differences between these two dark side types, a Dark Jedi and a Sith, as well as what the Sith's ultimate opinion was concerning the Dark Jedi as a whole. So if this topic prods your fancy, please stick with us as we break down the Sith's true opinions and views on their Dark Jedi brethren. I think it's important that when highlighting the differences between these two different types of dark side wielders, that we first establish with finality what they are. It is very easy to mistake a Dark Jedi for a Sith, as they both use the dark side, follow a master and apprentice structure, and in many cases, both groups use red lightsabers. But the difference is that a Sith are structured, and structured as an order that beings must be inducted into. They follow a creed, and all work towards a similar or semi-similar goals. Sith believe that the dark side in its truest sense can only be found when delving as deep as possible into its mysteries. Because of their extensive research, it will be from the Sith manuscripts that you find the richest knowledge concerning the dark side itself. Dark Jedi, on the other hand, are not an established order, or they aren't most of the time. In modern terms, Dark Jedi are those who have received proper training in the Force, whether as a Jedi that has fallen away from the Order into the dark side, or by receiving training from a Dark Jedi Master, as they are privy to the dark side. In many cases, Dark Jedi are mostly self-serving and don't follow any sort of code or have a structured order to which they pay their dues. One can actually find many Dark Jedi in the crime business, as many powerful ones have become well-known crime lords, gamblers, smugglers, and especially bounty hunters. Dark Jedi can originate from basically anywhere in the galaxy. Like we stated earlier, they could be fallen Jedi, or they could have actually been trained under another Jedi Master, one that eventually turned to the dark side, which happens far more often than you may think. Another source of a Dark Jedi could actually come from the Sith as well. To get a clearer picture, let's take a look at some of the famous Dark Jedi that we know of in the timeline. Whether you believe it or not, Maul, Savage, and post-Dooku Ventress would all fall into the category of a Dark Jedi. Ventress is in a limbo stage for a while she technically was a part of the Night Sisters, but after that she became a bounty hunter, and lived out the majority of her remaining days doing this until she met Quinlan Vos. Ventress still used the Force rather freely, and for most self-serving purposes. In the novel Dark Disciple, Ventress actually wields a yellow lightsaber that she had purchased on the black market. Maul and Savage, more so Darth Maul, actually would definitively classify as Dark Jedi, while the Dathomirian brothers did intend on overthrowing Sidious and becoming the new rule of two Sith. That all changed upon Savage's death. Maul had already renounced his Darth title upon his first death at the hands of Kenobi, and when we see him again in Rebels, he entirely denounces even being associated with the Sith at all, stating that his name is now just Maul. Now, way back in the day, Dark Jedi represented something else entirely. In the days of Ajunta Pal and his followers, the first Dark Jedi, it was almost synonymous with what we know about the Sith. So let's take a deeper look at this. The history of the Dark Jedi all starts in 24,500 BBY with the First Great Schism, when two young Jedi by the names of Arden Lin and Zendor began to believe that the Jedi Order had grown stagnant in their pursuit of a higher understanding of the Force. The two young Jedi collaborated and decided to take their followers and go study the dark side after their proposal was projected by the Jedi Council. These official two Dark Jedi would become known as the Legions of Leto, as they had set up their own temple on the Leto system. For a little while, there was actually peace between the Jedi and the Dark Jedi, although a strained peace. The Legions of Leto weren't seeking any wars, and certainly didn't want conflict with the Jedi Order. However, tensions would continue to rise between them, and it was becoming clear that it was growing increasingly more difficult to maintain a stable relationship or really coexist at all. The problem was that a generally large portion of the Jedi Order were breaking off to join the Legion and influence the dark side of the Force into the Order itself, and the Legion of Leto was beginning its own power creep in the galaxy. No one really knows who shot first, as the first attack has been lost to the pages of history. Either way, something happened between the Jedi and the Dark Jedi, and all-out war broke out between the two groups. Xandor wanted to keep the fledgling Republic out of the conflict by preeminently attacking the Jedi homeworld of Ossus, a desperate move. Their attack failed, and ironically, Xandor went against his own word by actually warning the Republic that the Jedi might pose a danger to them. Luckily for the Jedi, the Republic didn't seem to trust the legions of Leto, and they kept to themselves. The war was rather brief, and only lasted around a year, as unfortunately for our very first Dark Jedi, their failure would be swift and decisive, as the Jedi would utterly annihilate them all, exterminating the legions of Leto from the galaxy, thus ending the First Great Schism. The Second Great Schism, and the subsequent 100-year darkness as stated by Ajunta Pal and all of his dark side followers, is a famous topic for this channel. Most of you already know this story, so we won't dive all the way into it this time. The point that we want to make about the history of the Dark Jedi, though, is that they were basically synonymous with the Sith, up until the name changed, and the term Dark Jedi meant something entirely different moving forward, as many of the Dark Jedi became Sith, though powerful masters and apprentices from both of these would still be a threat upon the galaxy. One such pairing we can draw from hand-on experience is of course the Bafasi Dark Jedi. The Bafasi Dark Jedi as a species already has a rocky relationship with the Jedi Order in the first place. But when two powerful Force sensitives arose sometime during 1,000 years between the Old Republic and the Clone Wars, they caused a lot of damage. A Jedi Knight of Yoda's species, or perhaps even Yoda himself by the name of Minch, was a part of the strike team to deal with these Dark Jedi. These Dark Jedi were no joke, and even the apprentice was enough to overwhelm a young Yoda or Minch. The young Jedi Knight survived because his comrades rounded up the corner and faced the Dark Jedi apprentice for themselves before he could finish off the young Minch. Following this defeat, Minch rushed off to face the Bafasi Dark Jedi Master on his own, who had crash landed on the planet of Dagobah. This master exemplifies powers that were on the level of some very powerful Sith Lords. He was able to use Force illusion and multiply himself. Ultimately, he was struck down, and when his power was released, he forever tainted the cave on Dagobah with darkness. This proves that Dark Jedi aren't just Sith pretenders, but they do boast very threatening power levels given the chance. It really just varies from Dark Jedi to Dark Jedi. So now in depth that we have established what a Dark Jedi is, and how they differ from the Sith, what did the Sith actually think of the Dark Jedi? Like all darkside wielding orders in the galaxy, Sith usually fell somewhere between not really caring, or seeing them as somewhat lesser than they, or even outright hating them. Very rarely do we ever hear of a Sith being threatened by a Dark Jedi. And indeed, it does seem that Sith hold a certain amount of prestige among Dark Jedi. It isn't uncommon for Sith Lords to have taken advantage of Dark Jedi and simply used them as minions for a time. Exar Kun would do something of the same thing when he became a Sith Lord and would bring legions of Jedi over to his new order. Some Dark Jedi were known to have willingly gone along with the Sith and become allies with them, if nothing else than to use the opportunity to learn more about the dark side at their feet. You see, most Dark Jedi knew instantly that they were far weaker than a Sith. Sith, though, rarely elevated Dark Jedi beyond the level of a low minion, because they weren't to be trusted. Dark Jedi had a reputation of being cowardly, backstabbing, and loose-lipped among the Sith. If anything, Sith found them to be something of an irritant. They weren't powerful enough to be a threat, but Sith saw them as pretenders, and far less than they, with Darth Plagueis stating that he outright absolutely hated the Dark Jedi, as they represented holding power that they would never achieve. Since Dark Jedi mostly used the Force for selfish purposes, and rarely served any higher cause, Sith disliked working with them, and didn't view them as anything of real note whatsoever. One of the only times a Sith gave a Dark Jedi a real chance was when Bane's apprentice Zana attempted to take on one of her own apprentices. However, she quickly learned that he was far too selfish and cared nothing about the Sith rule of two. This Dark Jedi lacked ambition and was rather resistant to the deeper Sith teachings. Zana would eventually cut her losses and get rid of this Dark Jedi in favor of a new, more promising apprentice. And so, this was the general views on the Dark Jedi as seen by the Sith. Dark Jedi have a very extensive history, and many beings have been classified as Dark Jedi, too many to really mention in this video. However, we do plan on releasing a video talking about the most powerful versions of the Dark Jedi in all of Star Wars lore. So if you have anything else that you would like to know about Star Wars and the Dark Jedi, be sure to like the video. As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching and continuing to support the channel. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.